Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Gaura Pimanandi, Jayam Shripad Paramahamsa, Pri Rajagachadya Stotra Satta Sri Simad, His Divine Grace, Shirabai Charanarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Sri Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki, Iskandi Biti, Founder Charya Divine Sri Prabhupada Ki, Namacharya Sri Hridas Thakur Ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki, Harinam Sankirtana Ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Jai Nitai Gaura Primanande, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru, to Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurandiritam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaisnavam Sya Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakanvitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kansana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vansakalpa Tarubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Vyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narotamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer our respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayesha Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puraṇam Brahmasamhitam Uttama Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swasyayanam Maha. This Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantharaj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God, Srila Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Surabhyay Namaha Om Surabhyay Namaha Om Surabhyay Namaha Mukham Karoti Vasalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripat Maham Bandhe Sri Gurum Dinataranam Yat Kripat Maham Bandhe Sri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to our Bhagavatam class. We are continuing from the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam. This is chapter 2, entitled Hiranyakashipu, King of the Demons. Yesterday we read text number 12, and today therefore is text 13. Iti te bharatri nirdesham adaya shirasadritaha tatha prajanam kadanam vidaduhu kadana priyaha iti te bharatri nirdesham adaya shirasadritaha tatha prajanam kadanam vedadhu kadana priyaha iti te bharatri nirdesham adaya shirasadritaha tatha prajanam kadanam vidadu kadana priyaha iti te bharatri nirdesham adaya shirasadritaha tatha prajanam kadanam vidadhu kadana priyaha. Bolun. Itite bhatri nirdesham adaya sirasaditaha tatha prajanam kadanam vidadhu kadana priyaha. Someone else? Iti te bhatri nirdesham adaya sirasadritaha tatha prajanam kadanam vidadhu kadana priyaha. Okay. Iti te bhatri nirdesham adaya sirasadritaha tatha prajanam kadanam vidadhu kadana priyaha. Iti te bhatri nirdesham adaya sirasadritaha tatha prajanam kadanam vidadhu kadana priyaha. Iti, thus, te, they, bharatri, of the master, nirdesham, the direction, adaya, receiving, sirasa, with their heads, adritaha, respecting, tatha, so also, prajanam, of all these citizens, kadanam, persecution, vidaduhu, executed, kadana priyaha, who are expert in persecuting others. A translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Bring the clock. Watch time. Yeah. Thus, the demons, being fond of disastrous activities, took Hiranyakashipu's instructions on their heads with great respect and offered him obeisances. According to his directions, they engaged in envious activities directed against all living beings. Kindly repeat after me. Thus the demons, being fond of disastrous activities, took Hiranyakashipu's instructions on their heads with great respect and offered him obeisances. According to his directions, they engaged in envious activities directed against all living beings. So demons are also worshipped by other demons. Purport. The followers of demoniac principles are described here, are thoroughly envious of the general populace. In the present day, scientific advancement exemplifies such envy. The discovery of nuclear energy has been disastrous to people in general because demons all over the world are manufacturing nuclear weapons. The word kadanapriya is very significant in this regard. The demoniac persons who want to kill the Vedic culture are extremely envious of the feeble citizens, and they act in such a way that ultimately their discoveries will be inauspicious for everyone. Jagato hitaha. The 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita fully explains how the demons engage in sinful activities for the destruction of the populace. Translation again. Thus, the demons, being fond of disastrous activities, took Hiranyakashipu's instructions on their heads with great respect and offered him obeisances. According to his directions, they engaged in envious activities directed against all living beings. So the continuing explanation or narration of Hiranyakashipu's nefarious activities. In the previous few verses, we were reading how he had a very good understanding of what constitutes or what is the root foundation of the Vedic culture. Brahmanas, cows, and food production, which are connected with that. If Brahmanas are not present, if Brahmanas are extinguished, then that was Prabhupada's very nice comment in the purport yesterday. Without the presence of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas will be automatically misdirected. And when the Kshatriyas are misdirected, then the whole of society falls into chaotic condition. So this verse today, I think we can all relate to it very clearly and very strongly as well, because that is the state of affairs, so to speak, around the world. That was Srila Prabhupada's thinking, realization, very deep and profound realization when he left India in 1965, understanding that this was the prevalent situation all over the world, especially outside of India, because to a large extent out of India, outside of India, Vedic culture practically not existing, isn't it? And of course, within India, as we know, Vedic culture has been attacked in so many ways, has been tampered with in so many ways, so much so that many of the major symptoms that are appearing outside of India, that major adharmic symptoms, have become also very prominent here in India. So these are all, as Prabhupada mentions here, very thoroughly described in the chapter, the divine and the demoniac. One of the important instructions here is the word enviousness. People who are impure in consciousness, people who are not devotees, will naturally be envious of others. they will be threatened actually by the activities of others, and they will develop this disease mentality of competition. That's our root cause actually of all of our disease in the material world, because we have this false understanding of wanting to be the enjoyers and the controllers. Anyone who is opposing our ability to control and to enjoy becomes our enemy. That is why in the very first verse of the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna, idam tute guyatamam. Can you get that Bhagavad Gita actually? It's in my room. Bhagavad Gita. Idam tute guyatamam prabhakshyami. It's in my room. I will, not my room, but my room. The I and my is really deep-rooted. I've just come here yesterday. It's my room now. So the one of the most confidential chapters of the Bhagavad Gita is entitled "The Most Confidential Knowledge." It has that title, and the very first verse, "Idam tute guyatamam." This is Krishna speaking. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. Idam tute guyatamam pravakshyami anasuyave jnanam vijnana sahitam yaj yatva mokshase shubhat. Prabhupada translates as follows: the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, because you're never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence." So when we are not having this knowledge, when we are not cultivating this knowledge of Krishna consciousness, that means that we will be on the bodily platform, on the mental speculation platform, and therefore we will automatically be envious of others. We will automatically be planning in so many ways to bring others down. The complete opposite mentality of one who is in divine consciousness, isn't it? So actually the world has not changed, and the world will never change because that is the basic component within the material world. These two energies, the divine and the demoniac. The vast majority of people, especially, of course, in Kali Yuga, are totally caught up with the demoniac mentality. And therefore, the whole world naturally becomes totally chaotic. And the more chaotic that the material world becomes due to such mentality in the vast majority of people, and especially the vast majority of leaders within society, the more difficult, the more challenging in so many ways the situation becomes for devotees and for those who are innocent. Prabhupada explains, the mentality or the understanding for someone who has some knowledge, someone who's cultivating knowledge, he is meant to come to what is called the Madhyam Adhikari platform. So the Madhyam Adhikari platform is a very important platform to come to, because that is when one can recognize the different types of people that we are dealing with. One are the devotees, one are the the highly, let's say, atheistic, staunch atheistic people, such staunch atheistic people we should avoid. Then the third category are people who are just who are engaged in sinful activities, misled, and then the innocent people. So Prabhupada explains that actually the majority of people are innocent in the sense that if they get good leader, they can become good. And if they get bad leader, automatically they become bad also. Yeah. And therefore, these are the three categories to whom we can and should be preaching to, means be providing, be encouraging to cultivate this knowledge. Naturally, amongst devotees, we have satsanga, whereby we share our different thoughts and ideas, and in this way we nourish ourselves through sadhu sangha. And then the more we are nourished by this association of devotees, then we should automatically have this desire of bringing it to those who are caught up actually under these modes of material nature, either the grossly sinful persons, or those who are just innocent. If they get good association very quickly, easily they'll take to Krishna consciousness. And the real demons, we just offer them a gulab jamun occasionally, if they'll take it, some prasadam, or throughout, we generally, because the vast majority of people fall in the categories of, innocent and influenced by the modes of material nature, of course, and those who are completely demoniac, because they are very deeply convinced and deeply covered as well, we offer prayers to them and offer prasadam to them like that. So these instructions, here it mentions how those who are followers of demons, just like the followers of Hiranyakashipu, they will take his instructions very seriously, and they will engage in all kinds of, here Prabhupada mentions, they become very expert. Demoniac personalities are very expert in destroying devotees, or destroying, for that matter, anything in relation with devotees as well. So therefore, these two mentalities, the divine and the demoniac, as nicely explained in the Bhagavad Gita, very important for us to understand. The more we are familiar with these two mentalities, then we will reciprocate accordingly with different people that we come across. And the more we are familiar with these mentalities, the more we are familiar especially with the workings of the modes of material nature. Because there's a whole chapter, of course, chapter 14 in the Bhagavad Gita is focused on the three modes of material nature. And the same message, of course, is given there. As long as one is remaining under the modes of material nature, actually such a person in many ways is actually forced to act in all kinds of impure and demoniac ways. And the only remedy or the only solution is actually to, that's also nicely explained, since we have the Bhagavad Gita here now, is also the formula or the solution is also nicely given at the very end, actually, of the 14th chapter. the whole chapter up until verse 26, there are actually, what is it? 27 verses in the 14th chapter, and everything is like being built up. Lord Krishna answering questions that were asked by Arjuna, and at the very end, after Krishna provides this nice explanation of the workings of the modes of material nature, then Arjuna is asking how to recognize one who is not affected, one who is not under the control of the modes of material nature. And then after this, then Krishna gives the most important, we can say, instruction of the chapter. But I'll just read actually what Krishna answers to Arjuna in describing what are the characteristics of one who is no longer under the influence of the modes of material nature. Until and unless one becomes disconnected with these modes of material nature, one is going to be forced in so many ways in a dharmic kind of activities. So this is Krishna's answer to Arjuna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O son of Pandu, he who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear, who is unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of the material qualities, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active, who is situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is equal toward the desirable and the undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, and who has renounced all material activities. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of nature, which is, of course, a very elevated level. And in the very next verse, Krishna explains how one can do this, isn't it? And that is verse 26. Very well-known verse. Mam sayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samitityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Brahman means a transcendental platform, and of course there are different levels in Brahman, as we know. And yeah, actually Krishna gives a hint to that in the last verse of this chapter. Brahmano hi pratistaham amritasya vyayasya cha shasvatasya cha dharmasya Sukhasyai kanti kasyacha. And Krishna explains, and I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. It doesn't, we should not misunderstand rather, that Krishna is telling that Brahman realization is the ultimate happiness. The transcendental level or platform is actually the beginning of transcendental happiness or ultimate happiness, but it goes from what is called Brahmananda realization to What is the highest level of ah, from Brahmananda and Brahmananda. So therefore, devotees of Krishna, followers of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in particular, they are referred to not as Brahmanandis, but as Premanandis. Yeah, Gaura Premanandi, we are chanting at different times. So, so the same, this has been the situation in the world since time immemorial, and that is the makeup, so to speak, of the material world. These two mentalities, the divine and the demoniac, and those who are fortunate to be situated in the divine consciousness, those who are cultivating the divine consciousness, then they naturally, because they're situated in proper knowledge, they become naturally, automatically, the well-wishers of others, understanding their unfortunate and miserable condition, because all activities that are connected with adharma are a direct cause of all kinds of suffering and unhappiness in the material world. So, in hearing the instruction given yesterday, actually, by Hiranyakashipu in the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada took that instruction to bring out basic and essential points that are connected with dharma. And so it means just connecting to our first introductory statement, that inasmuch as the destruction of brahmanas, the destruction of cows, or the killing of cows, is destroying, being the root of the Vedic culture. Therefore, to reestablish the Vedic culture, then those need to be especially protected and reestablished. Means reestablishing the Brahminical culture and reestablishing the protection of cows. And although protection of cows is generally handed over or given to the Vaishyas are under the protection of the Kshatriyas. So unless there are Kshatriyas, Vaishyas will not be able to properly, in the same way that Kshatriyas will not be able to do their work if they're not guided by Brahmanas. Also, Vaishyas will not be able to execute properly their duty if they're not guided by proper Kshatriyas, isn't it? And it means that also the rest of the population, those who are not in the category of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, the rest of the population also will be suffering because of want. The Vaishyas will not be able to produce food properly, which is the situation around the world today, due to improper leadership, due to a lack of presence of divine personalities, divine consciousness, isn't it? Due to the overpresence of demoniac personalities. So at different times, situations, just like storms come at different times to clean things up, to revive, to regenerate. So at different times in the history, this is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita, when there is an overburden of demoniac mentality, demoniac activities, then Krishna in different ways makes arrangements so that this actually becomes dealt with, so to speak, and that because the ultimate purpose and goal is that is that dharma be established, isn't it? That is, Krishna's desire, that is the desire of Krishna's devotees as well. And our primary, this is what we always should be keeping in mind, our primary goal and objective in life is to actually work towards, as nicely instructed by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, first work towards establishing for our own self, ourselves become dharmic, to personally in our own lives, because that is the most important activity that we should all be taking up. And then, secondly, perform what is described by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as para upakar, isn't it? The highest, most beneficial welfare activity is to give this understanding, give this knowledge, and gradually help to re-establish dharma in all its different spheres like that. I'll just read once again the text here. Text 13, thus the demons, being fond of disastrous activities, complete opposite to devotees, naturally, took Hiranyakashipu's instructions on their heads with great respect and offered him obeisances. According to his instructions, they engaged in envious activities directed against all living beings. Any comments on this or questions? Yes.
Just understanding and comment. Maybe few people, as yesterday Prabhu was asking, there are many devotees against to like Varnashrama, why it is important. When we are giving higher consciousness, like that. Even I heard many. So based on this verse, I understand that Hiranyakashipu has more understanding than who are convinced about Varnashrama. Because he is asking to demolish those three, which are very important. Means he perceived the importance of that. So only thing is he's against, but he is very clear that these three are very important.
Yeah.
Cow, goat, Brahmana.
Yeah.
So as like me, people who are not much understanding, so Hiranyakashipu is better than me. I'm just feeling like I'm not much.
So we should be thankful to him. But we will not worship him.
He is clear in his understanding. These three are very important.
Yes.
Because importance only is ordering to.
I mean, the Maniac people also perform yajna, but for the wrong purpose. That's also, you see, that's why Prabhupada, in many places, he mentions how the Bhagavad Gita is meant to be studied by all of mankind. It's a book of knowledge for everyone, regardless of whether you believe or don't believe. It's also described, many years ago, someone had pointed that out to me. I had never thought about it, but Bhagavad Gita is described as the best book on psychology. It's the best because it completely clarifies, our makeup. Psychology is especially in terms of understanding the workings of the mind and the intelligence. So, the subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, and ego. So, any modern psychologist who has not read Bhagavad Gita will be missing out. Will not be properly guiding his patients, actually. So yes, everything, the essence, the basics are there. That's why we begin with Bhagavad Gita, and then we can more easily, more deeply get into Srimad Bhagavatam, especially, which is further elaboration, let's say, what is presented in the Bhagavad Gita. So yes, in previous times when the Vedic culture was actually established, then even personalities like Hiranyakashipu had more understanding than many people. So that's one aspect that we can learn from, and that was Prabhupada's statement also in the verse yesterday. From Prabhupada began the purport by saying, actually, this was the instruction given by Hiranyakashipu that we're just following up on today's verse. Text 12 was Hiranyakashipu speaking, immediately go wherever there is good protection of the cows and brahmanas, and wherever the Vedas are studied in terms of the Varnashrama principles. That was a verse yesterday. Set fire to those places and cut from the roots the trees there, which are the source of life. That was a verse. Yatra yatra dvija gavo veda varnashrama kriya tam tam janapadam yata sandipayata vrishchata. So Hiranyakashipu is very knowledgeable. Yeah. Well, you know, when his brother was destroyed or killed by yes, Lord Varaha, he started giving lectures to his family members, isn't it? Very deep philosophical.
Only those people who know Cosmic so much can do harm.
Yes.
As he said.
Right.
Because he knows, so he's taking.
Yes. So, yes, such persons are very, very clearly understanding. Again, we were discussing yesterday also the basic, the basic foundation, the basic principles of what makes up the Vedic culture. And again, I mean, it comes out again and again how, Namo Brahmanaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Jagat Hitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. When cows and brahmanas are protected, the whole world becomes protected. When the cows and the brahmanas are not protected, the whole world is in a very dire condition. Yeah, good point. Anything else? So
All of us, I was also about to ask that how much ever we tried. After the incident, I just think, oh, I was reading in Bhagavad Gita all this, why I am not able to apply this to this thing, why did I do like this? So
That's the environment also matters.
the environment is definitely a major factor, and in Kali Yuga, especially at this particular time in history, actually a very interesting point. Bodhi was telling Prabhupada that this whole very demoniac and difficult. He was specifically, this devotee was telling that the demoniac mentality since such a long time has been a cause of chaos and bringing suffering in the world. Prabhupada corrected him by telling that actually it's only been approximately 200 years. That up until 200 years ago, in other words, up until what is called the Industrial Revolution and French Revolution, they were very significant historically in taking away the roots of what are the Vedic culture. What was the main thrust of the French Revolution was to actually reject the church at the time. The church was misleading in so many ways, and also the monarchy in France. Not only in France, in the whole of Europe, but especially French people, they like revolution sometimes. So actually they made a whole revolution. It's known as the French Revolution, and rejected the church and rejected monarchy. So that means actually rejected the Brahmanas and rejected the Kshatriyas. And then this led or opened the doors, we can say, to what is called the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution is when, okay, well, a spiritual goal in life, when we're not cultivating spiritual knowledge, then material world is here, it's open to us, and let's go for it. So, since the last 200 years plus, a little bit, this has been the trajectory in the world today, becoming more and more materialistic, developing these atomic weapons, which are meant to destroy the world, and people becoming more and more demoniac in so many different ways, isn't it? So therefore, the solution to the problem is to again reestablish the brahmanas, isn't it? And ultimately to establish the ideal system of governance. And what is that system? Ideal system may not be possible immediately, but the ideal system of governance is monarchy, you see, which has practically been destroyed, as we know. But the basic, again, we were talking on this point yesterday, the basic principles relating to dharma are unchangeable principles, you see. Because it's like human nature is always human nature. Human nature means connected with the modes of material nature. So the modes of material nature have always been there and will always be there, because that's the nature of the material world. So again, coming back to this primary, fundamental, basic book of knowledge, Bhagavad Gita. That's why we teach slokas. We should be teaching slokas to our children. And traditionally, that was the reason. That is also the essence, in many ways, of the Gurukula system. And the Gurukula system, for the first so many years, they simply concentrate on learning, even though they may not understand. Because that becomes built in. It becomes like a natural library, And just like you have a library, you can go in the library, okay, take out this book, and you can have your reference. So the Vedic system is that you build in your library by memorizing these verses. And as you experience more in life, as you grow a little older, then you start meditating, and your understanding of those verses come to light. Just like whenever we read Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, if we are actually applying the system, we get more and more, wow, I read this verse before, but it's like that is the nature of these transcendental literatures. They are like always having that ability of providing us with more and more insights, more and more realizations. And the wonderful thing is that there's no end to this. It's unlimited, because Krishna consciousness knowledge, transcendental knowledge, is ever and ever expanding. And completely different from the very stale and very dead type of we could say aspect that is there in ordinary mundane materialistic kind of literatures. So it is not easy. Your point about the environment is most important, and in many ways, I would say, and we can close on this point here, that is one of many reasons why Srila Prabhupada emphasized the need and the importance for devotees to live together in communities. Of course, Prabhupada encouraged that devotees live close to temples where there can be some of that, but the ideal is to live within a community of devotees where we can have that association. Of course, that's also not so easy to do, because members of such communities That was a point that Prabhupada makes actually at the end of the 7th canto here in the Bhagavatam, when Narada Muni speaks specifically about Varnasrama, that this will only be possible when there's a larger number of people who are cultivating this knowledge and endeavoring to increase or to rise in their consciousness, increasing, endeavoring to come to the mode of goodness and of course beyond. But this last point is also very important. Prabhupada explains, we talked about this I think day before yesterday, Prabhupada explains that actually in order to become a Vaishnava, we should take help of that system of Varna and Asrama. That Krishna has created specifically the system of Varna and Asrama to help us actually become Vaishnavas. So in other words, first we come to the mode of goodness. And we all know, as you're mentioning, I think you're speaking for everyone, it's not easy to come to the mode of goodness. Sometimes people come to the mode of goodness, but they don't stay there. They again come, isn't it? It's up and down. That's again explaining the Bhagavad Gita. So if it is so difficult to come to the mode of goodness, what to speak of coming to the mode of pure goodness, which is the position of Vaishnava, pure Vaishnava. It can happen, it will happen, and it is gradually happening. We may not always be conscious of it if we simply nicely, properly apply the system that is given by Krishna. And ultimately, we need to come to the point of actually creating such communities, because in other words, the more we allow ourselves to be living in an unfavorable environment, then we are in a situation that is very difficult. Yeah.
Communities have been tried in cities now. We've seen some places where this community came in, but they were in cities. But we see a lot of problems happening there because it's not the natural environment.
Yes.
The community aspect came, but then there are some places where cities are there where a lot of devotees got together and started living together.
Right.
But that is not the ultimate solution. Also, city is not the ultimate solution.
Right. I mean, as a step in that direction, if one can live just like in Dallas, in Texas, in the U.S., the devotees, I went there a few times quite some years back, but where the temple was, that area was like a poor area, and there were many homes for sale. The devotees brought up all the homes on 2 blocks, and so like the 2 blocks surrounding the temple became like a devotee community, So that is much better than being scattered all over. But even better is where we can be more directly connected with cows and the land, because that is the more natural way actually of living, and that is the model that Krishna is giving us, of course, that is bringing us closer to the Vrindavan model. Prabhupada wanted us to create Vrindavan village, Vrindavan model, because that's where we're all trying to go back to that original Vrindavan. So the closer we can come to that original Vrindavan here, then it'll be easier to end up there. Right. Yeah. Okay, I think we'll close for now. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Sri Prabhupada ki, Gaura Pimanande. So we have a